Cover tracks. I love a good cover, and I love when a band either puts their own spin and style on a classic, or they take a track that is lukewarm and put it in a whole different spin. And progressive rock is a group and subgenre that does this quite often and does this quite beautifully. There are bands like Dream Theater, Neil Morse, and the Flower Kings that have put out full covers albums, if you can find them, as well as like a plethora of their tracks being on compilation albums for Genesis and Yes, being probably like the biggest two one that allow that. And I decided to kind of look at progressive rock covers. And what I really wanted to find is if there were any progressive rock artists that had covered like pop songs, or even pop artists that had covered progressive rock tracks. Unfortunately, the pickings were a little bit slim, but I was able to kind of piece together about 10 that I'm pretty excited to talk to you about. And these are just kind of my favorites. Now, just a little bit of ground rules. First off is just one track per artist. And this includes the entire gamut of bands covering the track, as well as the track's original artist as well. So there's only going to be like one track from Yes, whether it be a cover or their own cover. There's only going to be one track from Genesis, whether it be a cover or them doing the cover. Although I don't remember them outside of the medleys doing a cover of anybody else's work. Anyway, so that's kind of the ground rules. And also, this isn't in any kind of a ranked order. I'm not saying that the first one I'm going to be talking about is the best or the worst. I'm just putting them in a numerical order for my own sense of structure. So with all that being taken care of, let's dive in and talk about these covers. Number 1, 22, originally by Taylor Swift, performed by RNL. These guys are brilliant musicians, and I'm saddened that they haven't put out anything recently. Their live performances, as well as all their collaborations that they've done. They've collaborated with Pomplamoose. They've collaborated with Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater. They've done so many amazing original pieces, but really I love their cover of Taylor Swift's 22. If you want to listen to Taylor Swift's 22 track in a progressive rock sense, this is like the blending and molding of my two favorite worlds. So go and check that one out. Number 2, Thank You, originally by Alanis Morissette, covered by Steven Wilson. This one shouldn't come as a shock to most of you. This was my favorite track of his that he released off of his covers album. I just felt like a lot of his other stuff was okay, but this one like really stood out as being a star performer. I love his more singer-songwriter, more intimate approach to an already extremely intimate track. Alanis's original take on this, like in the music video, she's literally naked. So she's standing out like with everything exposed. And I feel like Steven Wilson takes that concept and really blends it and focuses in on that within this track. And it is such a brilliant realization of the music that it transcends the meaning even further. So yeah, this is one that I always highly recommend checking out if you're looking at a really interesting take on a modern classic. Number 3, Soldier of Fortune, originally done by Deep Purple, covered by Opeth. So Opeth has flirted a little bit with covers every once in a while, and I feel like Soldier of Fortune really paints a great picture of a really amazing and overlooked classic by Deep Purple. Like when you hear Deep Purple, you're always thinking of those like really big power tracks like Smoke on the Water, Space Truckin', Highway Star, and you don't really remember a lot of those like slower tracks, more of those intimate tracks. And I feel like Michael Eichelfeldt's vocal works on Soldier of Fortune just bleeds this extra dimension to the track that it didn't originally have. It's a bit fuller. It's a little bit bigger. And I really like what they do. Now, they do stay very close to home. There's not a whole lot of change-ups on it. I feel like they're just basically playing the songs themselves. But I do enjoy the richness of Michael's voice in this particular track. So that's why I have to talk about it here. Number 4, My Body is a Cage, originally performed by Arcade Fire, covered by Peter Gabriel. So Peter Gabriel put out like a really interesting covers album with Scratch My Back and I'll Scratch Yours. The first one being I'll Scratch, Scratch My Back, is him doing covers of other people's songs where he's not using drums or guitars. So he has to fill in the track in any way, shape, or form, usually with an orchestra. And I feel like the original track of My Body is a Cage from Arcade Fire is so big, it's so grandiose. You know, their leading instrument is a literal church organ. You don't get much bigger than that when the instrument itself is the room that you're playing in. So Peter's able not only to strip it back from that original source, but able to build it back up with a grander sound with the orchestra. And it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more intimate with Peter in his vocal work. And he brings this vulnerability to the performance within his vocals that I love. And his restructuring of the track, you've got almost a double build up that the original track didn't have. It's a brilliant, again, realization of the original concept that the group put down. And this is why I love covers. I genuinely do not enjoy covers that are beat for beat the exact same song played by different people. I like a reinterpretation. I love a remixing and a different sound, like realizing what the original spirit of the track was and expressing it in a different way. And that is what Peter Gabriel did in this. And it blows me away every single time I listen to it. This track alone is enough to pick up Scratch My Back. Even though the rest of the tracks are kind of hit and miss, this is the one that's like the star performer in that. Number 5, America, originally by Simon and Garfunkel, performed by Yes. Yeah, this is the one that I chose for Yes. So there's not going to be any covers of Yes on this. And one of the main reasons for that is whenever I hear a cover of a classic from Yes or Genesis or King Crimson or anything like that, I feel like whoever's covering it is afraid to change it up, to try different things, put a new spin on it. And I mean, you could not say the same for what Yes did to America. They stretched originally a 3-minute track or something like that, into a 9, sometimes 11, sometimes even 20-minute track, especially when they do this live. It wasn't originally on any album, but they perform it live quite often, and I believe it was off of one of the singles from Fragile, because when you get like the special edition CD, it's there. And I love what they do with this. I love how funky and fun it is. They still keep that original spirit that Simon and Garfunkel had laid down, but they really do push it in a completely different direction, and I particularly love that direction that they pushed it in. And it is a progressive rock track of a pop song. I hope I can find one, doing it the other way around, but there you go. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Number 6, Just the Same, originally released by Gentle Giant, performed by Jordan Rudess. So, Jordan Rudess, keyboardist for Dream Theater. If you hadn't already listened to, I believe it's The Road Home, his covers album, you should really check it out. The only issue that I do have is that most of the tracks off of this album are pretty much beat for beat like redos of these tracks, and in one hand that's fine, but on the other hand it does kind of fall flat. Now I still love what Jordan does with Just the Same from Gentle Giant. I mean, if you're covering Gentle Giant, that in itself is a feat, so I applaud him for trying something a little bit different and a little bit fun, but I am still a little bit, saddened that he didn't do anything really all that fun. There is a little bit of a jam session in the middle point that I do particularly enjoy. Yeah, and I know some people are wondering why I didn't include some other tracks from this collection of tracks. You'll understand in a bit. There's other covers that other people have done from those bands that I feel have been a little bit better. But yeah, I still love Just the Same. It's one of my favorite covers of his off of this. And yeah, it's a great time. And if you are a lover of that classic progressive rock and you haven't already checked out The Road Home, give it a spin, because it is mwah. Number 7, The Tenement and Funkster, originally by Queen, performed by Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater is no stranger to covers, especially when Mike Portnoy was with the band. They did a whole whack load of the bootleg series where they would tour by playing a classic album. They did one for Master of Puppets. They did one for Live in Japan from Deep Purple. They did one for Dark Side of the Moon. When they released the triple disc version of Dark Clouds and Silver Linings, the third disc, because the second disc was just the purely instrumentals, it was all covers. And they had such great tracks like There was one from Rainbow that I loved. There was the King Crimson's Lark's Tongue in Aspect 2 on it. There was so many meaty stuff, but the one that I loved and the one that I kept listening to again and again and again was the Queen track of Tenement Funkster. And I mean, Mike Portnoy did quite a number, I think all of the harmonizations on that one. And it was interesting. It was really interesting. They do fall in that same trap that Jordan's track did, where it's essentially just a paint by numbers redo of the track, but it was still really fun. And I still found myself enjoying it. And I still found, it's still a really good expression. Like, these are top-notch musicians playing a top-notch track. So altogether, it's a good time. That's what I've got to say about this one. Number 8, The Town Meeting, originally on the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack by Danny Elfman, played by the Polyphonic Spree. Now, this one might be the only one that you can argue isn't a progressive rock track. Like, Polyphonic Spree did just put out a full covers album where they cover a couple progressive rock tracks, like Spirit of the Radio, I think, is one of them. I feel like on here, this is my favorite type of cover. They take a original track that's, about 3 minutes long and then stretch it into this 8-minute amazing crescendo. This was, I believe, on the Nightmare Revisited album that I was able to pick up, and oh man, this track slaps. This really does. I love the Polyphonic Spree. I love their big sound that they're bringing to the table, and I love their interpretation of it. As I mentioned, they took a 3-minute just kind of filler track in some sense. Like, it's basically just Jack showing the people of Halloween Town the different aspects of Christmas and them not getting it. And they took that concept and really ran with it. And I love the buildups and the ebbs and flows. Like, this really is a progressive rock track in essence. And if you haven't already listened to it, I beg you to go and check it out, because it really is a fantastic expression. Number 9. Piano Concerto Number 1, or Toccata, originally performed by Ginastera, performed by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Now, Emerson, Lake and Palmer are no strangers to taking a classical piece of music and running with it. They did it with Pictures at an Exhibition, and the only reason why I didn't put that one on here was it was a little too easy, and it's a full-length album rather than a track, and I wanted to stick to tracks. What they did was they took the final movement of Piano Concerto Number 1 from Ginastera and made it into their own piece of music. And geez, I love it, because even though it really does follow the original track pretty closely, note for note, what they're able to do with it, it was groundbreaking. They put so much of that into the percussion work, because the actual piece itself is very percussive on the piano, and actually gave it to Carl Palmer on the drums to perform with his drum kit. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And you don't get a whole lot of bands doing that type of music anymore. And so, I had to put this one on, even though, as I mentioned, they do a lot of other covers, especially with ragtime type of tracks and more fun aspects like Hoedown and things like that. I still feel like this is their grand piece. Like, this is their big moment to shine. And most progressive rockers know about this one. And I would recommend, if you haven't heard the original piece, please go and do so, because it itself is very, very brilliant. So, this last one, the last track that I wanted to talk about, was the main reason why I wanted to do this, and I was holding on to it for the very end. So let's talk about it. It's bookend by my favorite one as well as my second favorite one. So let's talk about it. Number 10, Back in New York City, originally performed by Genesis, covered by Kevin Gilbert. Kevin Gilbert is a brilliant musician that left us way too soon. He put out a number of really, really great albums. I think Thump was one of them, as well as The Shaming of the True being his grand magnum opus. And originally he wanted to do a full Lamb Lies Down on Broadway show and cover album. Unfortunately, it never really came to pass, mainly because, he had passed. But one of the tracks that he did that I still love is Back in New York City. I love it because it takes that mythical New York City that Peter Gabriel had kind of conceived and put it into the stark reality of it that Kevin knew and lived and breathed. I love this track. If you haven't heard it already, please go and do so, because it's one of my all-time favorite covers of a track. And what it did is it elevated my enjoyment of the original track even more so. So those are my covers. Those are the ones that I loved. Was there one that you feel I left out? There were a few that I was kind of hemming and hawing over. I didn't know if I wanted to include it. What are your favorite covers of a progressive rock track or a pop track that has been made into a progressive rock track? Let me know all about that by commenting down below. And if you like what you see and you want to help support me, consider donating to my Patreon. I've left that link down below for you to check out. Even $1 a month, really, it does help. It really, really does. And you get your name at the end credits. No matter how much you donate, even if it's a one-time thing, your name's going to be in there. Unless you don't want it to be. So yeah, you can also check me out if you haven't gotten enough of this. Check out my tabletop role-playing game channel. I've left that link down below. I just finished talking about Paranoia, which was a lot of fun. Check out my podcast of Quid Prog Quo, wherever you're listening to podcasts, as well as here on YouTube. I've uploaded a few videos of me talking with my friends about progressive rock music. It's a lot of fun. I've left that link down below as well. And that's about it. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.